What if we fundamentally misunderstood many of the so-called hidden messages about sex or gender change in media? What if those references were never meant to imply post-birth gender transition or surgery, but instead pointed to pre-birth selection technologies, specifically PGD, Preimplantation Genetic Diagnosis, which allows parents using IVF to select embryos based on sex and other genetic traits before pregnancy even begins? Take a line from Will and Grace, where a father says to his child, "The hardest decision of my life was deciding whether to raise you as a boy or a girl." Most people now hear that line through a modern lens and assume it refers to post-birth gender transition or identity struggles. But that interpretation may be a retrofitted assumption, shaped by today's cultural debates rather than the technological realities that quietly existed when the line was written. That line could just as easily be referring to a decision made long before birth, in a fertility clinic, not a living room. PGD isn't science fiction, and it isn't new. It has existed for decades, often justified publicly to avoid sex-linked genetic diseases, but it also opened the door to elective sex selection, a topic that has always been ethically sensitive and therefore rarely discussed openly. Because these decisions happen before a child exists in the social world, they create a linguistic problem. How do you talk about a life-altering choice made before birth without saying it directly? You end up with vague, emotionally framed language like, "We chose your future," or "the hardest decision was raising you as a boy or a girl." Those phrases sound like post-birth identity struggles, but they could just as plausibly be coded language for pre-birth selection. If that's the case, it reframes a lot. Some cultural references we now interpret as commentary on gender transition may actually have been early, indirect acknowledgments of designer baby technologies, softened for public consumption at a time when openly discussing lab-based sex selection would have raised ethical alarms. Public awareness lagged far behind private capability. Technologies like PGD were available to a small, wealthy, or medically connected group long before the general public understood their implications, and media may have hinted at these realities without ever spelling them out. So instead of assuming these lines were about changing a child after birth, it's worth asking whether they were pointing to a choice made before the child ever existed, shifting the ethical question from identity to choice, control, and technology, hidden in plain sight.